Let's just look. Thank you. Thank you. So we will be recording our meeting for today in order to share it with those who are unable to attend. For the focus of our study, I want us to look at Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. And because it's very short and especially relevant for our study today, we're just going to read it. Genesis 2, verses 1 to 3. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all their multitude. And on the seventh day, God finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. Okay, so today I think you can understand that the topic is going to be the Sabbath. What is the meaning of the Sabbath? Because this is the first time we're getting introduced to the idea. In this passage, the word Sabbath does not occur. Genesis chapter 2 is the origin story of the Sabbath. And the Sabbath won't make full sense until the time of the Exodus. And we'll explain and we'll connect it all together because that's what's going to make it especially relevant and important for us in today's context. But we want to look at what is the Sabbath, why is it there, and what does it mean for us today? So these three things. So what is the Sabbath? Well, the Sabbath is what we call the last day of the week, the seventh day. And it is the day after God finished all of the creating. On the seventh day, he rests. And he doesn't do any, at least from what we're reading right now, he's not doing any new work, but he's resting. And then he's making this day as a special day. It's not like any of the other days. It has something different to it. Now, when we read this story, we have to understand that Genesis 1 is not going to give us the full teachings on the meaning of the Sabbath, but it only starts us on what the Sabbath means. So we have to understand this beginning portion of it, and then we can get into a little bit more depth by looking at the other passages. So we just read these first three verses. What does it mean when God rests on the seventh day? Does God need to rest? He just did all of these things by speaking. How can he be so quickly tired after talking? I know some people who, if you give them the microphone, they will go on and on and on talking. They have no problem stopping. If they were in charge, they would never have a seventh day of rest. But here God rests and he stops from what he was doing. Now, this concept will not make sense unless we understand it within its context. The colors that we see make more sense when you have a background color. If you don't have a background color, it's very difficult to understand or to appreciate the brightness or the hue of a particular color. So it's against the background that we can really appreciate certain things. In the ancient world, there are many ancient stories that we have today that talk about the understanding of the ancient people and how they thought the world came to be. So I'll share with you what they thought. They thought that after the gods created the human beings, they thought that their God was now resting because they created manual labor. They don't need to do any more work. The whole point of the gods creating human beings, according to them, was so that they can take a break. They can go on vacation. And now they have the humans to do all the small work around the world. Now, this is a great idea if you are a king, because the king of the land is considered as the god. And so the king can sit around and do nothing all day, and he can expect that the people should be working and the people should come and give him the offerings. And you understand that in that culture, that story is very profitable for the people in charge. And against that story, you have a group of people who understand God, Yahweh, and they know that their God is different. And their God teaches them that on the seventh day, God rests, but he's inviting the human beings into that rest. This is God's seventh day. But you know what? This is also Adam and Eve's first day. So, yes, I know that you're thinking that Eve is only created in Genesis chapter 2. But Genesis chapter 2 is another way of seeing the full creation story again. When we're reading Genesis chapter 1, God created human beings in his image. Male and female, he created them. So in Genesis chapter 1, humans are there by the sixth day. And humans are entering into this special day that God has designated as a day of rest. Unlike all the other worldly cultures that say that no, humans are here to work and to serve the whims and the pleasures and the mood swings of the gods or the kings, the Bible is saying, no, listen, our God is a good and gracious God. And you know what the first thing our God does is he tells us, relax. Now, did human beings have work to do? Some people misunderstand or they don't quite catch this. And they think that work only comes by Genesis chapter 3, right? By Genesis chapter 3, after they sinned, there's the punishment that Adam has to till the ground. And some people think that, oh, that's when work started. But no, work started in Genesis chapter 1 to fill the earth and to subdue it. Again, it's even mentioned in Genesis chapter 2 to till it and to keep it. So from the beginning, human beings had work to do. Now, work is not a punishment. Our kids might feel like it's a punishment. We might feel like it's a punishment. But one, if you love what you do, it's not a punishment, it's a joy. And the second thing is, if it's for a good reason, if you're serving a good cause, you know that it's a very blessed thing to be a part of. Adam and Eve were having work to do, but even they're told on the first day of their existence, rest. So it teaches us a few things. One, it teaches us that we need to rely on the finished work of God. Now, you can hopefully hear some theological notes in that. When Jesus was on the cross, what did he say? It is finished. It is finished. And so when a person comes to believe and accept Christ, they're entering into a kind of rest. They're entering into the work that God has already completed. He has saved us. He has shown us his love. He has accepted us. There's no impulse for a believer to have to do something to now please or appease. Appease is a better word, to appease God. And instead, they understand that when we enter into God's presence, we ought to be quiet, we ought to be humble, and we ought to take find a kind of peace and rest in and through Him. But does that mean that humans don't have to work or do something on the seventh day? So one of the reasons why this teaching of the Sabbath hasn't become popular today is because there are a group of Christians who have, in the same attitude as the Pharisees, have made the seventh day, the Sabbath day, to be some sort of religious observance. They've made it out to be that, oh, this, and this is the way that the Sabbath has to be. And you must not do anything else. Just like the Pharisees said, no work should be done. There's still some Christians who believe that in a very generic sense, no work should be done. But in a second, we're going to investigate and we're going to realize that that's not what God was talking about. There is work to be done, but there is a work that can only be done if we are relying and resting on God's strength and his finished work. let's look at this phrase. God blessed the seventh day and he made it holy. What does it mean to make something holy? Another word in Hebrew, the word is kadosh. And I think you may have heard that word if one of your previous Achins enjoys speaking in Syriac. Kadosh is a Syriac word that's very similar. It means the same thing, holy. Right? So what does it mean to be holy? In one sense, it means to be sanctified or set apart. Right? It's set apart for a special use. Now that one word we could spend a full day on, because I'm sure that our concept of the word holy needs to be biblically corrected. But in a nutshell, let me just say this. The word holy does not mean so morally perfect that you are far removed from everyone else. Holy means being close to God. That's what holy means, to be near to God. And so whenever the holy God was made manifest in the wilderness with the people, he was in the midst of them. And that's how they could understand his holiness. The ground that you are walking on is holy ground because it's near to me. That's what God tells to Moses at the burning bush as he was approaching the burning bush. God is not telling him to get away. God is telling him to come closer because it's holy ground. And so the concept of holiness means that there is a nearness to God. You know, in the Old Testament, and we're much more familiar with this idea, we can understand of a space that is close to God. Like the temple is a space that is close to God. In the Exodus, the tabernacle was a sanctified space. Only certain people can go into the tabernacle because it's a sanctified space. We have the church, and then we have the madbaha. And the madbaha is considered to be a kind of sanctified space. And it's considered to be somehow, it symbolizes nearness to God. It's a symbol. I hope everyone understands that. Where you are sitting right now is just as close to God as when an achin is in the madbaha. Right? So don't misunderstand that. It is a symbolic representation and teaching, like the temple. You go to the temple because you are reminded of the presence of God. So the temple was a sanctified space. Sabbath is a sanctified time. It is a time when you are symbolically told to remember that God is near to you, because it is a holy time, because it is a sanctified time. So the meaning or the depth of that day becomes even more profound, because human beings are suddenly created and they're being asked to come into a special time with God, to be near to God. Oftentimes we have a rhythm. Everybody has a rhythm. We have the alarm clock that wakes us up, and then we have the morning routine. And that morning routine, whatever it is, it helps us to stay in rhythm. God understands that human beings all have a particular rhythm. And so he very carefully says, make sure that in the rhythm of your life, that you understand that there is a symbolic day that teaches you that God is near to you always. There's one day that's especially set apart to teach you that God is near to you always. Just like the temple is a space that is set apart to teach you that God is near to you everywhere. We misunderstand it when we think that God is only in the church or that we should only be a certain way on Sunday. So here we're trying to understand in a wider sense. Now, if and now let's look at this, because the word Sabbath doesn't come here. The Sabbath is now only taught to us by the time of the Exodus. So you know that the 10 Commandments shows up 2 times in the Bible. That doesn't mean there are 20 commandments. There's still only 10. but they show up 2 times. So the first time is in Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20, and if you want the very specific verses, verses 10, verses 10 and 11, I believe. Let me just quickly double check. Exodus 20. Verses 10 and 11. Right. So here it says, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you or your daughter, your sons or your daughters, your male or female slaves, your livestock, or the alien residents in your town. And then he gives the reasoning behind it. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but rested the 7th day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the 7th day, and he the Sabbath day, and he consecrated it. Again, the same word, kadosh, means to make it special, to make it holy. So the commandment that we have, the 4th commandment, according to Exodus, is to remember the Sabbath and to keep it holy. You should labor on the 6 days, but on the 7th day, don't labor. And this is because of the creation story. But when you go and you read the second account, Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 12 to 13. So Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 12 on, we'll read the same thing, but a slightly different rationale now is given. Here, the same 4th commandment, observe the Sabbath and keep it holy, as the Lord God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you or your sons or your daughters or your male or female slaves or your ox or donkey or any of your livestock or the residents in your town or the aliens, so that your male and female slaves may rest as well. And then now another reason why for the Sabbath. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. So something is happening here, because Deuteronomy's re-explanation of the Sabbath adds a new dimension to this day. Before, we were told rest on the 7th because God rested, but we didn't really fully understand or appreciate it because that's all the information we got. But now imagine generations in slavery in Egypt, generations that never got a moment's of rest. You know how the story went, where God through Moses is trying to get the people just to come out and worship. That's how it started. It wasn't for freedom, it was for rest. Moses was supposed to go and ask the Pharaoh, give the people a chance to come into the wilderness and worship. Pharaoh said, no, they need to work. They need to work. And so they continued working. And then you know the story. He makes the work even harder. So please understand that the Genesis chapter 2 Sabbath origins are connected to now a socio-economic situation, to a time and a place and a government structure and the people who are going through a great deal of difficulty. What is so bad about the economic system of Pharaoh? Well, it robs people from the opportunity to be reminded that God is in control, that God has done the work, and that we can rest in him. It robs the people of the opportunity to recognize that time, all time, is God's time, because they're not even given the chance to celebrate the 7th day and make it holy. Now, I don't think it's too much of a stretch for us to recognize that we are still, in many ways, in that system. There are many people who still feel the need to work. For what reason? They don't know. Work so that you get a house, and then what? No, work so that you can get a bigger retirement, and then what? Work so that you can leave an inheritance to your kids, and then what? We don't know why we're working. We're just working and going, and we lose then a sense of our God-given purpose in this world when we lose the rhythm that God has given to us. God wants us to stop from all of those things just for a moment and pause and reflect on his work in the world. And so, in the context now of the Exodus, we see that the Sabbath is a reminder: don't force the people in your land to work. And the mandate is not just for you and for me, it's for the slaves, it's for the animals, meaning it's for all creation. Everyone needs to rest. The idea of abusing the world that God has given to us as if it's just some use and dispose kind of item that has very little value, that mentality will not allow even creation to rest. By the time you get to Romans chapter 8, there Paul very clearly says, all creation is groaning and eagerly longing for the sons of God, and we can, in our understanding, the sons and daughters of God to be revealed. Why? What will the sons and daughters of God do? Well, they're going to bring an awareness of the Sabbath, of the rest, of the reign of God into the world. Now, I hope that you see that the picture and the concept of the Sabbath is widening. Unfortunately, the people at the time didn't quite go in the right direction with it. They were given a commandment: keep it holy, don't do work. And so they took that one line, don't do work, and then they started saying, what is work? Oh, you're not supposed to walk this far. You're not supposed to make a knot. If you make a knot, that's work. If you untie a knot, that's work. And so there's very clever things that the Jewish people would do. What if you want to take your donkey and go somewhere, but you have to tie your donkey the previous night? So there's a special knot that you can make that doesn't require untying. You just pull on it and the knot will unravel. And so they found workarounds to try and follow the observance of the letter of the law without understanding the spirit of the law. And so the spirit of the law was never about work or not work, because as we already learned in Genesis 1, there is work. In Genesis 2, there is work to be done. The rest that we're supposed to find is better associated with the word shalom, with the word peace. What God wants us to do is experience peace, especially on this day. Now, when you look at the life of Jesus, he brings this Sabbath into its greatest dimension. Many of the gospel stories tell us of how Jesus is working on the Sabbath. In fact, that was one of the primary reasons why he ends up getting killed, why he ends up getting murdered by the chief leaders, because he was coming up with an interpretation of the law that made them look like fools. It made them look like they were oppressive people. And so they don't like when Jesus is finding this kind of a new interpretation. Jesus was healing a man who was sick for 38 years. 38 years he was there. Not a single person lifted a finger to help him get into the pool. Because if you read that story in John chapter 5, it's not there in all Bible translations, by the way, but you'll still see that footnote there in your English Bibles. An angel would come and stir the water so that whoever enters into the water first would be healed. No one in 38 years cared one bit to help this man. And so what does Jesus do? Of all the days, he picks the Sabbath. He picks the Sabbath day and he goes and he heals this man. Then the complaint comes, why are you healing on the Sabbath? Can someone read John chapter 5, verse 17? John chapter 5, verse 17. Yes.
Jesus said to them, "My Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working."
Okay. My Father is always at work and I too am working. Oh, wait a minute. Didn't we just read that God rested on the seventh day? So now we have to re-understand what that rest means. Now, if we keep the word shalom in our mind, we understand then what that word means. It doesn't mean laziness. It doesn't mean tired. By the way, does God get tired? You can just do a shake of your head and I'll know if what your answer is. Does God get tired? Remember, if I ask a question, you know there's a trick. So yes and no. God doesn't get tired in that physical sense, but there's one thing that makes God really tired. What is that one thing? In Isaiah chapter 1, verse 14, when human beings observe the festivals and the new moons and these Sabbath observances in an unholy manner, when people don't listen and follow the commands that God has done, and when they make a show of it, that makes God tired. In fact, as far as I know, and I'm still a student of the Bible, this is the only thing I found that makes God tired, that wearies him and burdens him, is when believers don't do and fulfill the purposes of these festivals, of these celebrations that we have in a godly way. So God is always at work. So what is the work of God? The work of God is to bring peace, to bring shalom to everyone, because there's nothing more restful than shalom, than peace. There's another passage just after in Mark's gospel, in Mark chapter 2, verse 27. There, Jesus's disciples were plucking grains on the Sabbath, and they were eating it. That's work according to the people. And so Jesus says, well, David had no problem going and eating the bread from the temple on the Sabbath. And then he goes on to say, listen, everybody, Sabbath is made for human beings. Human beings aren't made for Sabbath. Meaning, this seventh day is a bonus day that God created with you and me in mind. It's not just so that we can fulfill our calendar and make our days and our months correct. That's not the reason for the seventh day. Here, Jesus is saying that God established one extra day for human beings, because this is something that will not only be blessed, because the seventh day is blessed and it is holy, but it will make us blessed and it will enable us to be holy. And again, the word holy is not moral perfection. The word holy means being closer to God. It includes a better way of living life, but the deeper meaning is being closer to God. So there, if you then think of it, this whole purpose of Sunday, by the way, we've not discussed this yet, and I'm not going to get too into it. The Jewish calendar, the seventh day is the last day of the week. That's the Sabbath. Christians, we just barely modified it. We liked that day so much that we made it the first day of our week and not the last day of our week. That's okay. Don't get too bothered about that. There's a group of people called Seventh-day Adventists that make a big deal about it. We're not going to get into that conversation now, but just so you know that there is this difference, this distinction between our common Christian community and the importance we give to this day. We know that this day is given for us. It is created for us. So we need to find ways to be blessed by this day. If we go further on in that same gospel, in Mark's gospel, so now that verse 27 is pretty much the last verse in that chapter. You have to get into the next chapter. And there you see another story of Jesus healing again on the Sabbath. And basically, then we get the idea that Sabbath really is for restoration. Sabbath really is a day of of work that is the Lord's work, as opposed to our work, as opposed to something that is meant for my sustenance and my well-being. The seventh day is a day that is supposed to reorient my mind so that I have a better direction and trajectory for the rest of the week, but reorient my mind so that I am more concerned about bringing other people into the rest and the peace of God. And that's what Mark chapter 3, verse 4 and 5 are all about. And by the way, this episodes in Mark chapter 2 and Mark chapter 3, it's also there in Matthew and in Luke. These are repeated episodes, but we're highlighting Mark because Mark is the only one that has that phrase, Sabbath is for the man, man is not for the Sabbath. So let's conclude this because our time is almost up. In Genesis chapter 2, we have the seventh day that's being created. God creates this day so that Adam and Eve, so that all humanity, so that you and me, that we can enter into a time of rest. It is a sanctified time. It is a set apart time. And because it is sanctified, because it is a holy time, it is a time for us to draw closer to God, not just to pretend to be morally superior to others, but to really humbly bow down. And it's also a time to engage in the mission of God, to bring restoration. Remember the Exodus. We were all, and many of us and many of our children still are in a kind of Egypt style slavery mentality. Maybe it's our fault. Maybe it's the culture in America, whatever it may be. There's so many people who think that life is all about work. God is teaching us that no, life is about restoration. Life is about bringing justice and peace to others who have been neglected and to restore their humanity and their purpose and their dignity in this world, and to enable them to experience the presence of God. So hopefully this gives us new dimensions of this day, of the Sabbath. And hopefully now when Sunday comes, let's give it the honor that it's due, because this is God's tool to do something in our hearts and in our lives. And if we honor God and honor the day, we will be a blessing to others. Maybe we were thinking that I was going to say we would be blessed. That's true, but we will be a blessing to others. That is the point. So let's conclude with that, and then we'll pause here and take any questions if you have them. I hope you have.